For variable initialization, there are two ways to do it. So the first way can be done right at the variable declaration place. So here you have var, which declares the variable, and the variable name, colon, and the type of variable. So then what you can do is you put a space, colon, equals, and then the value that you want to give it. So for example, it's a string. You would put a quote, and then, for example, you put a name. So for example, George. And this gives them the variable name, gives the value George to the variable name. So every time you use that variable, for example, put name, then you run your program, like if you press run, then it would just have the name George. You could also do this you can also like assign this variable in a different way, just like this. You erase this using two lines. You go to the next one, you put the variable name, space, colon, equals, and again, since it's a string, which is a text variable, you put a quotation, and then the variable you want to give it, then an end quotation. So again, if you put name, then you'll do the exact same thing in what I did before in this, mean the exact same thing. You could also do it with an integer variable or a real integer or a boolean. So for example, you could do var age colon int, and then you could put colon equals 15, for example. Or a boolean, you might learn that later in the course. You could do var variable name, for example, just because I can't think of one, colon boolean colon equals, and then Boolean variables are either true or false, so let's say I could put false. Also notice how numbers don't need quotations, and if they do have quotations, then the computer treats it as a text value. Also, text cannot be given to an integer or a real value, and also when giving values to variables, you have to make sure you keep to the type, so true or false for Boolean. Whole numbers are also negative ones for integers. Text for string. Decimal numbers are also whole numbers, and integers for real. So there's a few examples on one of the subpages in the variable initialization page in this website. So I'm just going to do the first exercise. So it says you have to write a program that will declare and initialize a string variable to hold the value Fred, and then an integer variable to hold the value 108. And then the program should display this in a message and then ask the user but for their age and name. So the first thing you should do is declare the variables that you're going to use. So you do var name and then declare the type, and that would be string. And then again, you want us to give it the value Fred. So there's two ways to do this. I'm just going to do it the way with one line. Colon equals quotation, because it's a string, which is a text variable, and then you write Fred. And now next you want to put the integer value, which is 108, and that is Fred's age. So you put var age, because the variable should be a bit descriptive of its function, colon, it's an integer, colon equals 108. Also notice again how there's no quotations for 108 because it's not a text value. And then you can use these variables in a sentence. So you do put, then you do name, comma in order to separate variables from a sentence, quote, because you're going to start text, space is, and then again quote, comma, then you do age, comma, space, quotation, years old. So then when you run this, then it's going to say Fred space is space 108 space years old. And now you're going to ask the user what their name is. So you would put what is your name? And now you need a variable which will store their name. So here you go up to the top where you would declare the variable. You put var user name, which is a name that you, like a name for the variable that I made up, which is descriptive of its function. And then you give it a type, which is string, and it doesn't have a value, so you can't declare it yet. In order to get a value, you put get and then the variable name, so user name. And then when you run this program, it's gonna get the username, and then after that, you're gonna ask the user for his or her age. So you do put how old are you, and that will be another integer. So you would make another variable for that, user age colon. That would be another integer. So you put int. You don't have a value yet, so you don't assign it a value, and you do get user age because it's going to start into this variable. And then when you run it, you want to put it all in one message. So what you would do in this case is you could do put, like you could say quotation hi, and then here, and then you put a comma to separate text from a variable, user name, and then you would say hi to like Ted or hi Lucy or anything like that. Quote. Hi username, and then you put a period. You are, and then you put another quote because you're going to put the variable. User age, which is the variable, which is what you're gonna get the value of it over here. Years old. So for example, the user puts in Andrea, and the user age could be like 26. So you say, hi Andrea, period, you are 26 years old. So that's what will happen when you run it. Now for exercise 2, the question asks you to write a program that will ask the user to input his or her weight and then calculate their weight that would be on Jupiter or Mars and print it on the screen. So the weight on Jupiter is just a note that it's 236% from that on Earth, and on Mars is 38%. So first you want to declare a variable which will store the value of the weight of the user. So you put var weight because the variable name should describe what it's doing, and then a colon, and then it's probably going to be real because you don't know if the user is going to put in an integer number or a decimal number. And then you're going to want to ask them what their weight is. So you do put how much do you weigh, and then you're going to want to get the variable. So you would say get weight, and then when they input a variable, it's going to store it to this variable, and then you can use it later in the program. And you're going to put a few titles, so you would now put, for example, your weight on Jupiter is, and then you're going to put a comma in order to separate the variable from the text, and you will put weight times, which is an asterisk, and then you do 200, right, 2.36, which is the same as 236%. And then that would be their weight on Jupiter. So let's say they put 100 as their weight. 100 times 2.36 would be 236. And then another one. Put, and then this would be for Mars. Put your weight on Mars is, and then you put a colon, quotation since you're ending text. You put a comma, weight times 0.38. And then this will take the weight and multiply it by 0.38. So if again the weight that they input is 100, 100 times 0.38 will be 38. So on Mars they would be 38 pounds. Now I'm going to show you guys how to do the last exercise on the website, which is calculating the circumference of a circle. So you need the variable that you need could be either radius or diameter. So I'm just going to do it with radius. So you have to declare a variable, and you can call it radius because the name of the variable has to be descriptive of what it's doing. And then it can be a decimal number, so you want to make it real, because if you put a decimal number in an integer value, then there's going to be an error and your program's going to crash. So next you should ask the user, what is the radius of the circle? And just to remind us, in order to calculate the circumference of a circle, that would be 2 times the radius times pi, and we're gonna assume that pi is approximately 3.141592665. I'm just gonna leave it there. So then now you're gonna get radius, and you would say put, and then you could say the circumference of your circle is, and then you put a quote because you're about to end text, you put a comma, and then you do the math for it. So you do, as we put in the formula here, 2, then asterisk, because you need an asterisk multiplication, radius, then again another asterisk, 3.141592665. And that will get you the circumference of your circle. Also, just know that since it is a real variable, which it's only decimal numbers, if the user does put units, then your program will crash because it won't recognize units and it won't recognize the entire thing. Like it won't pick out the numbers out of the variable.